Good morning. Welcome to Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. I'm so glad to be here this morning with all of you. Thank you for being here. There's so much going on in the world and in our personal lives that it really is a choice and a commitment to get yourself here. So thank you. We have a new sign on Buff's front door. We stand with immigrant families. Did you see it when you came in? Solidarity with our immigrant neighbors is something we all need to be explicit about. And I've seen those signs all over town, and I think there's a way to get some. I don't know what it is, but there's a way, I know, because they are being widely distributed. Many of you are aware that Paul, our previous minister, and his wife, Jane Beckel, moved to Minneapolis when they left here last summer. Jane's recent post on Facebook starts out with the words, "We are not okay." Jeff Copeland, Peggy Jones, Rod Haynes, and a few others from Lunch for All on Tuesday called and talked to Paul. He echoed that statement. There is a telegram to Minneapolis paper out on the table in the narthex that you're invited to sign to send a message of love and support to Minneapolis, and it will be mailed to Paul. None of us are okay with what's happening. But here we are, together, and being together is important. I want to invite you this morning to greet your neighbors here in this congregation. Peter's sermon last Sunday on Namaste was a lovely invitation and a reminder to truly see each other. The God or goodness in me sees the God or goodness in you. So whether you want to express namaste non-verbally or simply say thank you for being here, I'd like us to take a few minutes to greet each other now, and I will ring a bell to return to our group gathering. All of that beautiful energy that just happened here is an example of what can happen at coffee hour. and I invite you to greet each other after the service downstairs. My name is Stephanie Rains. My pronouns are she and her. Carrie Kenline and I are the coordinators of our monthly Taizé service that happens here tomorrow evening. Taizé began in France in response to war and suffering as a way to bring people together for prayer and meditation for peace. Some of you may know there's a peace march happening in Bellingham right now. Taizé's been modified in this country, and our Unitarian version doesn't have a Christian emphasis. In these dark times, coming together for this service can calm our nervous systems. We offer it on the first Monday of every month at 7 p.m. here in the sanctuary and also on Zoom. The Buff website has more details, and it's in your order of service. If you feel agitated or just soul weary, that's the Taizé worship service could be helpful. Please read the other announcements in your written order of service. I believe there's still a request for help with garden cleanup, especially trucks. You can read all about it. And that's an example of how We Build Community is working together. Our worship leaders this morning are Sunny McMillan, our minister, Rose Edington and Mel Hoover, both retired ministers. And we're so lucky to have their shared wisdom and life experience to provide some historical perspective and help us navigate what's happening now. Let's take a deep breath together. Settle into your seats and bring some calm to your being as we listen to Ian play our prelude.
This is a little bit different setup than I'm used to. There we go. Morning. My name is Sunny. I'm the minister here at Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship, or BUF as we affectionately call it. My pronouns are she and her, and my visual descriptors are that I am a middle-aged white woman with red hair, fair skin, and reading glasses with a cream sweater and burnt orange pants. When I arrived at BUF last fall, I was pleasantly surprised to discover there are about 10 retired and/or practicing ministers in our midst, each of whom operate in their own zones of genius around here. It has been my privilege to work with them, to share the pulpit and create services, and today is one of those days. I am excited to work with Reverend Dr. Rose Edington and Reverend Dr. Mel Hoover. Before we go any further in our service this morning, however, I want to take a moment and circle back to Stephanie's welcome this morning, which included some updates from Buff's former minister, Reverend Paul Beckel, who lives mere blocks from where Renee Good was shot and killed by ICE agents just a few short weeks ago. As we have heard, Paul and his wife Jane have been on the ground resisting ICE and supporting immigrants. One of the folks who spoke with Paul this week was Buffster Rena Jersica, and she shared with me her idea that we light a second candle today for Minneapolis and really everywhere right now that's being so severely impacted. I loved this idea. So as we light our chalice today, let us also light a second candle for Minneapolis. As Stephanie lights both our chalice and the second candle, I am sharing words from Reverend Ashley Horan, UUA, or Unitarian Universalist Association, Vice President for Programs and Ministries, and a resident of Minneapolis. She writes, "Since Operation Metro Surge began in December, Minneapolis has been deep in the work of protecting one another and caring for our neighbors. From witnessing firsthand the moments after Renee Good's murder, to coordinating grocery deliveries and rides to work and school, to retrieving abandoned cars after their owners have been snatched, my neighbors and I have had to constantly and creatively respond to ICE's violent occupation of our streets. Yet amidst these horrors, I have never been prouder to belong to this beautiful, resilient city of Minneapolis." So we light our chalice to open sacred space of our worship today, and we light the second chalice or candle to acknowledge the courage, the community, the horrors, the beauty, the resilience of Minneapolis. Reverend Ashley went on to say that she has never felt more rooted in or buoyed by Unitarian Universalism because our faith is unequivocally showing up here and across the country with clarity and courage, refusing fear and injustice, and proclaiming the power of love to transform our world. Over 600 clergy from various faith traditions answered the nationwide call to go to Minneapolis about a week ago. And of those 600, 200 were Unitarian Universalists. Such a response is not surprising. And in fact, this moment is reminiscent of the moment in March of 1965 when Martin Luther King Jr. put out the nationwide call to clergy to join him in Selma, Alabama. Back then, more than 200 UUs responded, including about 1/5 of all UU ministers. Our tradition has a long history of showing up in movements for justice. Few among us have done as much showing up for justice as have clergy couple Rose and Mel here. In fact, according to a 2013 article in UU World magazine, Mel first learned of Unitarian Universalism watching white people march alongside Black civil rights activists in Selma. He found out those folks were UUs, and he wanted to know them better. And now here we are, with Rose and Mel, co-ministers emeriti of the UU congregation in Charleston, West Virginia, and award-winning major players in our denomination when it comes to the work of anti-racism, anti-oppression, gender equality, and the creation of beloved community. I've now had the opportunity to meet with Mel and Rose on multiple occasions, and inevitably, Mel will ask something like, "Now, do you know such and such person?" Or, "Do you know the real story behind the Black empowerment controversy?" And through those conversations, it became apparent there is a lot of Black Unitarian Universalist history that many, including me, a UU minister, do not know. So today we will be sharing some of that history because, as one of my favorite divinity school professors used to often say, if we don't know history, we can't think ethically. In this current moment, when this administration, this regime, refuses to acknowledge any wrongdoing and is doing its best to erase any history that does not fit its narrative, we need to know our history so we can think ethically, so we can act for justice. What we have witnessed in Minneapolis and beyond is horrific and disturbing. Real human lives are being impacted in violent and terrifying ways, and real human lives are being taken. And I still believe there is reason for hope. In a conversation on January 10th, just 3 days after the murder of Renee Good, Yale professor of history Joanne Freeman sat down for a talk with Boston College professor of history Heather Cox Richardson, who is one of the only news sources that I trust these days. In this call, Joanne Freeman said of this moment for this administration, and keep in mind this is a history professor who has studied the rise and fall of various regimes, Joanne said, "They realize it's their last-ditch possibility. They know they're not the majority. They know what they're doing does not have approval. They realize, and it's hard to believe, but please listen, they're in a position of weakness. They are performing brutality. They are performing strength. They are performing dominance because they don't have it. They don't have the numbers and they don't have the power. So what we're seeing right now is deliberately concentrated, forceful, nasty, bloody, because it is their last attempt to grab what they've been trying to get all along. But they realize that fates are not with them. Fates are not with them. I believe this. In our tradition, we are called, as the familiar hymn, Fire of Commitment says, to be a new prophetic voice. So let us answer that call. Let us learn our history so we can think ethically. Let us grieve and lament the horrors befalling our fellow humans in Minneapolis and beyond. And let us act with bold clarity and courage to be a prophetic voice, to continue bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice, showing the worst among us that the fates are not with them. And now I invite you to join together with me in reading our covenant, printed in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant. And changing gears just a little bit, part of how Buff is able to show up in service and work for peace in this community and beyond is through stewardship. Through the contribution of time, talent, and treasure to this fellowship, we ramp up toward this year's stewardship campaign. And you will see often the pledge box around if you are ready at any time to put in your card. And we also have invited a few Buffsters to share testimonials of why they give of their time, talent, and treasure to Buff. Today's testimonial comes from Vanessa Lott.
Good morning. So I'm Vanessa Lott, she, her. I identify as a white 40-something soccer mom who's also a procrastinator. So I wrote this down this morning. So thank you for your patience as I read a little bit. So Buff, this space, the greater U community, has been a part of my life off and on for many years. You could classify it as decades. I started coming here as a child with my large and colorful family. It was a place of respite, growth, and grounding connection when I needed it most. A place where I learned that a good question can be more inspiring than a good answer, and that connection and community are the antidotes to chaos, whether it's in our personal lives, in our towns, in the greater world. A space, if you allow me to expand on last service, namaste, kind of like is our theme. It allows us to be in a place where we might say that the caring in me sees the caring in you, or the struggling in me sees the struggling in you. Possibly the grieving in me sees the grieving in you, or the hopeful in me sees the hopeful in you. Our community is sustained by our collective investment. I choose to do this by volunteering on committees, facilitating small portions at Buff events, and welcoming new families as we corral our kiddos at coffee hour. You've probably seen this. Or a monthly pledge that is directly deposited. I don't have to think about it, which is my favorite. Second only to searching for the perfect children's book to invite people into the theme of a service. I've had the privilege of seeing the ways that so many people contribute to sustaining this community. On the many committees, planning and leading events, Sunday worship and beyond, even the day-to-day needs of making sure that the linens get washed every week. It would be overwhelming for any individual to meet all these needs, so we do it together. We consider what we have capacity to give, how we might apply our skills, our passions, our interests, and our pledges to sustain this community, or maybe we might move beyond sustaining and help it grow, so that more people might feel safe, seen and supported on this journey we call life. Lastly, one last callback. My reason for investing in Buff is simply stated in the phrase, the Ubuntu phrase shared at the Restorative Justice Service, I am because we are.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Mel Hoover, and I use our beloved community programs, I, you, we, us. We are gathered. I am standing here dressed in black mostly, with a dashiki of multicolors that comes originally from African cloth from a friend and was put together by a young woman from West Virginia who stitched it and created that cloth into what I wear today. And I liked it so much that I married her. In fact, it was my wedding garment originally. And it has championed us and been with me for 55 plus years. I also have on me, I have a clergy collar on, intentionally. I'm also an Episcopal minister in my original denomination, but also this is a symbol of clergy in terms of Christian traditions that are recognized that Unitarian and Universalist ministers actually wore for centuries. But we wear it today because it's about connecting our role to be the voice of the people. And when we are at demonstrations, most Unitarian Universalists choose to wear that collar because it is recognized as a symbol of faith in action. I also wear my Unity and Empowerment necklace, which I first put on in 1962. We're here because we need love. So we thought we should share that song, There Is More Love Somewhere. Could you turn to your hymn book at page 95? I want to tell you just a little bit real quick. We chose this song because of the lyrics, which are very much needed in these times, especially since ice needs more love so that it will melt. And we also chose this hymn for its name, Biko. Some of you may know it, but many do not, I'm sure. It is an African-American melody dedicated to the memory of Stephen Biko. Biko was a young, dynamic anti-apartheid activist in South Africa who was becoming well-known internationally. I remember in 1977 when he was arrested and how he died in police custody, intentionally murdered. He was only 31 years old in 1977, and he and I were in a similar time period, and he was an actual spiritual colleague in courage for me. Biko and those who have lost their lives in Minneapolis share the same spirit and belief in an inclusive, equality-based future. So may our singing, prayers, and actions bring more love, hope, peace, and joy until as UUA President Sophia Bittencourt prayed, and by the way, she witnessed and was arrested recently. She is now out, but she was our face to the nation. Until our songs are songs of victory and our children know themselves to be safe and whole, let it be. So I invite you to stand as you are willing and able. And the words are fairly simple. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. And you'll see the changes in terms of love and hope, peace, and joy. So, Ian? There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. Hope. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. Peace. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. Joy. There is. Come on, sing it. Oh, let the neighbors hear it. There is more joy somewhere. They're gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy right here.
Sorry, I'm sniffling, probably like a lot of you. So it's time for all ages. So I want to invite all of our children and youth up who'd like to come sit up here by me. Okay. We have our peace officer right here. We got Sophie, we got Tora, we got all of our friends up here and our friends who are out there. My name is Liz Epperson. I use she, her pronouns. I identify as a white woman with dark red hair with some gray in it because I'm about 45. And I'm wearing a black top and a pink skirt. And I am the religious education director here at Bellingham Unitarian. Before I tell our story, we talk upstairs a lot about faith and action. Our Soul Matters curriculum is all about taking our values and integrating them into our lives so that we can live our faith every day. And last Friday, some of these kids know, what did we do last Friday? What were you doing here at Bellingham Unitarian Friday night, Acorn? Were you sitting inside of a box? We were sitting inside cardboard car boxes and watching Herbie. It was our first parents' night out since I started, something I know Genia had done regularly, and it was a tradition to walk over to Elizabeth Station. The parents would walk over there and we would hang out with the kids here. Well, Friday was also a economic blackout in support of Minneapolis, our neighbors and friends being attacked, protesters, and a lot of our Bellingham businesses, I saw it happening within days. Wednesday, businesses were, I don't know if I can close, I can't be the only one. And then Friday, tons of businesses were closed, and some were open and donating their proceeds. So we made a little change. Elizabeth Station closed, but Brandywine is a BIPOC-owned business, and they donated their proceeds and stayed open, and the families went there. And some other families chose to stay home as well and just be together. And that is faith in action. And now I'm going to tell a story. I left it over there. Okay, so, y'all, it's February. It's Black History Month, and we are going to learn some of our UU history. And today, we're going to talk about somebody who came before the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who helped light the torch that he and everybody else carried during the Civil Rights Movement. More than 150 years ago, before cars and airplanes, when people traveled by train and women wore long skirts and hats, a little girl named Fanny Berrier lived in New York State with her parents, her brother George, and her sister Ella. Fanny's family went to school, did chores, played in the snow, and went to church on Sundays, just like you guys. Her dad was a deacon, her mom taught Bible school, and Fanny played the piano and loved to paint. In many ways, her life was ordinary and happy, but one thing made it very different. Back then, many people wrongly believed that some people were better than others, men better than women, white people better than black people, and Fanny Berrier was a black girl. When she grew up, Fanny wanted to study music and art, but when she went to Boston, her classmates said, "We don't want her here. She's dark, so she doesn't belong. If she stays, we'll all go." So the school asked her to leave. So she went, I know, we've got a what? It still happens sometimes too, but it was considered a little more normal in those days. So she went to Washington, D.C. instead to study painting. They let her in, but she had to sit behind a screen because if the other students know you're here, her teacher said, they'll make you go. So that was the compromise. She could be in the class, but nobody could see her. Over and over again, people told Fanny she didn't belong, not because of who she was inside, but because of the color of her skin. And it wasn't fair. It was racism, and Fanny knew it was wrong. When she was older and living in Chicago, some women invited her to join a club. Wasn't that nice? Yeah, that's what we do, right? We see a new friend at school, we see someone who's alone, we invite them to join us. But some people in the club said, no, if she stays, we'll leave. They argued about it for more than a year. Yeah, wow. Finally, they voted to let Fanny in, but when she joined, those other women did leave. Now, Fanny didn't like that. It hurts when people won't let you belong. And it hurts when people don't want you around. Some days, Fanny felt angry about it. Some days, she felt sad. But most days, Fanny had no time to feel angry or sad because she was busy making groups of her own. That's a good idea, huh? Yeah, she made some groups of her own. She knew how much it hurt to be left out, and she knew it would be a lot easier and more fun to get things done together with others than by yourself. And I already heard that today. Vanessa was talking about that. It's fun to do things together. She and her husband, the lawyer S. Lang Williams, joined the All Souls Unitarian Church in Chicago. They helped start a hospital where everybody was welcome, no matter the color of their skin. They created a group to study art and music. Fanny worked for women's rights to vote and helped found the NAACP, one of the most important civil rights organizations in our country. Fanny didn't live to see everything she dreamed of come true, but because she resisted, taught, built, and believed, the world grew fairer step by step. She showed what it means to practice justice and not just wish for it. So, what I love about this story is how it reminds us that while Dr. King carried the torch in the fight against racism, people like Fanny Barrier Williams helped light it. And now it's our turn to carry that light forward. Every time we speak up, bear witness to, or help change something unfair, we are practicing resistance and fighting racism, and we are living our UU value of justice. So thanks, everybody, and let's sing our kids upstairs.
February the 1st, so welcome to Black History Month. I think you've all heard what my name is today already. I am a white woman getting elderly. I have light brown hair that is streaking gray. I have on basically black with a sort of a tan jacket and a UU Service Committee chalice. I think that's enough. I think. She, her pronouns. Okay, I'm still learning to do all this stuff because we didn't do it back before I retired. So 100 years ago, in February 1926, Carter G. Woodson's dream that the USA would acknowledge and celebrate Black history led to the first annual Negro History Week, as it was called then, which grew into Black History Month. Woodson chose February as it is the month when both Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln were born. And it is now up to us to be vigilant about observing Black History Month so it doesn't fade away in today's anti-diversity movement. Many of you know that I am from West Virginia. That is where Carter Woodson once mined coal, and in his later life went on to become Dean of Students at the historically Black college, West Virginia State, the school across the river from where I lived. We were taught to be proud of our West Virginia history, of seceding from Virginia and helping save the Union during the Civil War, of being a free state and not a slave state. When schools were integrated in West Virginia, it went very smoothly, at least on the surface. The formerly all-Black school just outside the city limits became my junior high school. It was McKinley Junior High. I didn't know until years later that when it was a Black school, its name was the Carter G. Woodson School. we were required to study West Virginia history in the 8th grade. Yet no mention was made of the founder of Black history in the school once named for him. Ironically, integration led to the obliteration of historian Woodson's name, connection, and pride for the Black community, as well as a loss for knowing about Black history and accomplishments for the white community.
Think of the school naming incident as one of the nearly invisible lids of suppression that contributed to the need for storms of change.
We all know that we are in the midst of stormy times. As the example from Carter G. Woodson shows, the storms we are experiencing haven't just happened to fall from the sky. We white people have a weird history of being suspicious of and thinking we are better than people of color, and often of poor white folks. And too often we have tried to put a lid on their aspirations. Our history tells us that we intentionally decided to annihilate the original inhabitants of North America. We instituted chattel slavery and continue to perpetuate slavery through the 13th Amendment that preserves slavery for the imprisoned. We mistreated Chinese immigrants. We interred Japanese people during World War II. The first president I really remember being aware of was Dwight Eisenhower, the revered general of World War II, who went on, of course, to become president. Yet, he also spoke about the dangers of the military-industrial complex, and I really liked to hear that. But he also managed to deport 1 million people of Mexican descent during his administration.
So is it any wonder that with all the lids that we've placed on the people's aspirations, that we live in a nation with a stormy, stormy history? That some have been in the storm way too long.
I have found it helpful to liken the dynamics of our stormy historical context to actual physical thunderstorms. As someone who grew up where summers had stifling humidity, I loved a good storm because the more oppressive the humidity, the more we needed a big booming storm to bring relief. I cheered those sheets of rain and the loud thunder and lightning flashes and would run outside in it as soon as it felt safe. To have a good storm, it takes heavy, cold air pressing down like a lid on hot, moist air, plus a cold front or some gusts of wind to get the downdrafts and updrafts going for the clear the air storm to drench us with refreshing coolness. And of course, we were also quite aware that some storms were dangerous, especially the big ones that would change the landscape if they were tornadoes or hurricanes. When people are denied their humanity, when they are coerced into accepting their assignment in the pecking order, when awareness of oppression's cold, heavy blanket of grayness spreads over the land so heavily that even your thoughts are in danger of being controlled, sooner or later, there will be storms of various sizes. As we are seeing in settings from Iran to Minnesota and more places across the country, including in my beloved West Virginia, where ICE has managed to find 650 people to deport in a low... 650 people, Mel, to deport in that one little state that is not very populated. People resist having a lid put on their desires for freedom from fear and oppression. We all want the freedom to live full lives as who we are. These days, it feels like we are in a landscape-changing storm.
In a physical storm, no one blames the heated moist air that pushes against the heavier, cold air that leads to a storm. However, when the chilling laws and practices of authoritarians put a lid on people labeled as other, it is usually the dissenting other who is first ignored, then blamed for the storm, and labeled a threat, an agitator, or even a terrorist.
We Unitarian Universalists, and since merging Unitarians, Universalists, and since 1961, Unitarian Universalists, have a splendid history of being in stormy situations. Our very name comes from being other, being dissenters, not following a pope or the Orthodox Christianity of the Trinity. In wanting to be ourselves without forcing others to be or think as we do, we are dissidents, dissenters. We are choosing love, choosing to be beloved community, because that has to be a choice, because forcing someone into beloved community makes it become unbeloved. You may have noticed that I called us dissenters, which I see as the opposite of consenters. Gail Beckerman, author of How to Be a Dissident, says, dissenters resist the pressures of conformity or even the natural instinct towards self-preservation in order to say no. She gave as an example those who conducted the Underground Railroad. Mel and I talk about that kind of no as the holy no, which then makes room for the transforming yes.
So that reminds me of the historical holy no from Unitarian minister Theodore Parker, an originator of the phrase, believe it or not, the moral arc of the universe is long and it bends towards justice. Those were words that often Dr. King spoke. Many don't know that Dr. King and his wife had relationships and attended UU congregations, and he understood our history. A well carried forth phrase, I think. We have come to know that the arc, however, doesn't bend by itself. Am I right? It needs all of us to pull it toward the arc of justice. We have to bend it. Parker dissented when the Supreme Court upheld the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. Its ruling stated that federal law supersedes state laws. Beckerman said that, quote, turned the United States into a hunting ground for slaveholders, unquote. It led Parker to carry a pistol with him in his congregation and to keep it in the pulpit when he preached, daring a slave catcher to take away any of the people of color in his congregation who were there in the back row, but they were there. He also carried his pistol with him as he escorted escaped slaves to and from church. And he made it clear he would use it if anyone tried to intervene. Oh, by the way, that wasn't legal then. Parker, along with Thomas Wigglesworth, were two Unitarian ministers who were members of the Secret Six. You know about the Secret Six? They were Northern abolitionists who secretly funded John Brown's Kansas actions to keep it a free state. And he had people who rode around and made sure people of color were protected, and the Ku Klux Klan and others could not intimidate people. And also for the raid on Harper's Ferry, where John Brown, who was white, by the way, worked to keep slavery and hoped that by raiding the federal arsenal, let me just say that, it was really important. He thought if we could get there and the gun supplies and ammunition was there, that he could grab that, seize that, and then travel throughout the land, inviting black slaves to join him, and that effort would overthrow the time. Unfortunately, he was wrong. But he had an effort. So going back to Parker, what I want to bring up that he did have a commitment as well to the abolition of slavery. He still held onto his belief that African Americans, while deserving protection, were not on par intellectually or culturally with white people. So his worldview at that time, which was advanced for a time, was one, as I call it, more of animal rights. But nevertheless, Parker's protection and abolitionist activities were expression of his holy no, which was part of the buildup that made possible the Civil War, which I think we all agree was certainly a landscape-changing storm. So as I stand here, I'm wondering how we are feeling about our dynamics going on in our lives today throughout our land, including the communities in which we now live, is how people felt in the build-up to the Civil War. It feels like that deep in my bones. It feels like that in terms of the ancestors' whisper through the centuries to me that we are now in the midst of a political landscaping changing storm. Because we in the U.S. have a very mixed history, a very mixed history. Some people today say that what ICE is doing isn't American, but if it isn't American, it would not be happening. The Fugitive Slave Law and Act let us know that ICE is continuing an American practice of deciding who is legal and who is not, who can move around freely and who is afraid to leave their own homes. Our lofty democratic ideals are in stormy conflict with some of our laws and actions. And right now, today, what we are calling un-American is happening to more of us and more publicly. Was it American that we had Jim Crow that led to segregation? And at their worst, lynchings of black people and the right to murder any black person that a white person had at that time? Did America become more American when white UUs joined the many people of color who were wounded or killed during the stormy civil rights era? Why did it take the deaths of white leaders, UU Reverend James Reeb and Viola Luiso, a layperson, and of an Episcopal seminary, white Episcopal seminarian Jonathan Daniels, who was protecting a black girl in the store and stood in front of her to take the bullet, to help turn the tide in getting the Voting Rights Act passed? Reeb, Luiso, and Daniels were the Renee Good and Alex Pretty of today.
We know the storms won't last forever, so we ask, what happens after a storm? Minneapolis is still in post-storm trauma from the murder of George Floyd in 2020, not all that far from where Good and Pretty lost their lives. We don't know yet what will come out of today's storms and traumas. We do know that things do not go back to the way they were before a storm. The deaths of UU's Reeb and Liuzzo let the world know that UUs would put our lives on the line for people of color. So naturally, people of color felt they would be welcomed in our congregations and general assemblies. But our too white denomination wasn't prepared for an influx of African Americans in the late 60s. Our newly created denomination from the merger of Unitarians and Universalists felt like it might split apart over the Black empowerment movement. Yet life within Unitarian Universalism could not go back to the way it was pre-empowerment, any more than our country can go back to the pre-civil rights era, although it has never given up trying. After the Black empowerment movement, UU attempts to return to our practice of integration were not enough. We needed to do much more than integrate people of color into a mostly white denomination. We needed to learn how to become an anti-racist faith. That is why Dr. Loretta Williams, Director of Social Responsibility for the UUA, put together the Black Concerns Working Group and called for that group to meet at UUA headquarters in Boston in September 1985. I well remember that. Not that I was at the meeting, but Mel was there. And I remember, not just that you were half your current age back then, but because that was when Hurricane Gloria struck. We were living in Stamford, Connecticut, and you and George Squires from Long Island were determined to get to that meeting. I thought you all were nuts. Both of you, though, were crazily committed enough to take the train in a hurricane and get yourselves to Boston. And you weren't the only crazy ones, because there were 7 of you who managed to get there. And while you were there, you managed, thankfully, to get stormed in.
Let me just give a sentence or two, because I felt I had to be there because the year before, a number of us, young adults, Black participants, allies of jointness, of coming together as Blacks and whites, the Women's Federation and others joined together along with several of the board members. There were 4 Black board members in the year before of GA. And one of the things they had done is to say that we've been making a couple reports and stuff. That's not the faith taking seriously an institutional commitment to this. And so we need to decide what we're going to do. And out of that conversation, they proposed, and the General Assembly adopted, the establishment of a Black Concerns Working Group as a commission of the faith to try and help us begin to build a new path forward. So that's important. So this was our faith publicly saying that we are not who we need to be, and we commit to correct that together. So I did feel I had to be there. The other reality was, because of few Black ministers at that time, I was, in fact, although a Black minister, I was not serving as a UU member in a congregation. I was serving an ecumenical interfaith agency, but a leader within Unitarian Universalism and the justice movements, and in terms of creating, as co-director of the Metro New York district, which is a UU district, Winnie Norman, who was the Black board member, and myself were the co-chairs of that. And so I put that in context for reason that this was a faith commitment that I felt I was committed to carry out. And I knew Rose was concerned, and we had to wait a few days before we could actually get there. Those of you who don't know, Hurricane Gloria at that time was one of the most ferocious storms we'd had in the nation. We had power out, we had debris everywhere. I couldn't fly at that time from where I was, but I could take a train. It was the longest train ride from Stamford, Connecticut to Boston I took in my life, because they were literally taking lines off the tracks as we traveled.
Trees off the track.
And trees, no, there were also
Oh, the
power
power
lines.
lines too,
There were
yeah.
trees, there were power lines. So in terms of the safety issue, we had to take the time we took to get there. And I must admit, when I got there and got into Boston, Loretta Williams and I knew each other. We were friends. I did not know these other people, these strangers in the land. I knew one. I knew Winnie. And I knew, actually, I take that back. I knew Norma Poinsett, who was a leader in the Chicago congregation, which was one of our multiracial congregations. And Doris Edwards, who was in our New York congregation, Community Church of New York, which also was a racial congregation. In that sense, when I say racial, we're talking about a handful of folks still in our churches, but more than a handful in those few. And so I'm putting that again in context. And George Squire, I knew because George and I had worked together, and he and Herb Jones were the co-chairs of the Plandome congregation at church, which became the congregation that actually saved our faith in terms of creating resources. And Winnie Norman and I were the co-chairs, and our committee received $100,000 from the congregation to be able to try and work in New York region, to be able to try and really begin to be a model of how we could come together to model for the rest of the faith, how black and white could really work together. But when I got there and the others arrived and we introduced ourselves, Loretta, almost with a smile on her face, passed out a piece of paper and says, "This is the charge that the board has written." Because when you had a national commission like that, or authorized board, the board still would say, "This is what we're asking you to do," right? So when we read it, I heard this strange sound coming from other people as I was making mine. And we looked at it and said, did they really write this? The charge says, "We empower you to take on the task of creating racial justice within Unitarian Universalism and beyond." Some of us have thought about which one of us yelled first, "You must be kidding."
Wait till you hear what was in the budget for it.
And yes, and the budget you have is $5,000. And the only reason we had the budget is because Loretta knew how things worked. She actually built those dollars into us so we knew we could have a meeting. So it was so preposterous that we decided to spend some of our budget on dinner. And I remember saying to Loretta, I have two questions. Where's the most expensive and best place to eat? And how soon can we leave town? But the good news was we couldn't. The food was good, by the way. We did get a great restaurant. But Hurricane Gore kept us together. That storm changed history for Unitarian Universalism. As we began to sit there that evening and getting to know each other and to get to ask the question, we came here for a purpose. What purpose did we come here for, and shared that? We then said, we have a thought. And at that point, I will tell you, George Squire, the other reason I wanted to go at that time, I knew that George Squire was dying. And one of George's last commitments was he wanted to have his faith take seriously the reality of black and white being together and being in our faith within our nation. And he didn't share that publicly at that time with people, but I knew that. But George and I talked, and Winnie Norman, and we said, what if we offered to take our $100,000 instead of using it for Metro New York, that we use that as a catalyst for our faith, that we propose a 3-year process in which we will fund the first year, and that if the UU will form at least 2 more years, to allow this committee to sit down, to visit with our churches and find out why we were stuck and how we were stuck. To listen to the people in the pews, because it's in the pews that the faith lives and dies. And so we then wrote 2 letters. The first one said to the board, we refuse this body of people gathered here refuses your charge because it makes no sense. However, we've written a charge that we'd be willing to accept, and if you are willing to commit and guarantee the next 2 years, we will take it on. So that was the beginning of that kind of opportunity of, they accepted it, and it began the challenge for me and for all of us that most people didn't know was a journey at that time, a powerful journey. From 1965, not wanting to deal with racism beyond an integration approach, as people of color were welcome to integrate into our mostly white congregations.
Wait a second.
And
It's 1985.
yeah, I'm 81, sorry.
Excuses.
No, seriously, thank you, Rose.
Yeah.
But the issue again was siding with love and covenanting together to work for becoming a beloved community is quite a story. And that was part of what people didn't know at the time, that that's what we needed to be. So part of our teaching was to help that happen.
Well, Mel, I think there were certainly a lot of positive outcomes from the Hurricane Gloria storm, and it changed our faith over the years. But since we UUs are not perfect human beings, and we sometimes reflect the greater culture around us, implementing an anti-racist value also generated some storms within our faith, because we found out how easy it is to defer to white supremacy as the default. Some of you here may remember the fallout from the UUA hiring practices in 2017, when all newly hired regional leads ended up being white males, and our UUA president resigned. The UUA board acted and set up a commission to study ourselves, and that study resulted in Widening the Circle, the program that this congregation, most of you here, widely embraced.
We have learned that the storms arising when equity, peace, and justice are challenged will come and they will go. Hopefully, each one moves us closer to beloved community. Among all humans and with all life on our planet. So we persevere. That's what we can do. That's what we can do. That's what others have done in the past. That's what we are called to do together. So in fact, our children and grandchildren will have a place to be and become. Remember, our history tells us that when we stand, when we sit, when we march and do whatever we must do to stay with one another in love, we are ultimately unstoppable. We together are unstoppable. As we worked on this service, words of an old Baptist hymn kept rising and coming through us, through our thoughts. So we would like to share it. When the storms of life are raging, stand by me. When the storms of life are raging, stand by me. When the world is tossing me like a ship upon the sea, stand by me.
In the midst of tribulations, stand by me. In the midst of tribulations, stand by me. When the hosts of hell assail and my strength begins to fail, stand by me. Because
we need each other. Let us continue to stand by one another and with one another. Will you stand with us? Yes. Will you stand with one another? Yes. Will we stand together with the others who are standing up? Yes. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all for being here and being here in this congregation willing to stand up. As you decide what to put in the offering this morning, I invite you to think about what you are grateful for here. If the ushers would please come forward, and Ian is going to play beautiful music while we wrestle with these thoughts that Mel and Rose have shared with us.
Leave know that we smooshed the two reflections into one. So I'm going to invite Ellie to come up and lead us in our closing hymn. And we're doing the first three verses as they are written. On the fourth verse, we're going to change the words to "We can all be together in that land." But let's get to that land, folks.
What's the number, Rose?
Oh, it's number 1018 in the Teal book. 1018.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and
And now, as we prepare to leave this sacred space and go back out into the world, may we learn our history so we can think ethically. May we grieve and lament the horrors befalling our fellow humans in Minneapolis and beyond. And may we act with bold clarity and courage to be a prophetic voice, to continue bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice, showing the worst among us that the fates are not with them. As Stephanie extinguishes, I affirm that we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Now I invite you to circle round for our closing song.